for joining us for another ACUHO webinar. If you've attended an ACUHO webinar before, this webinar series is a part of ACUHO's ongoing commitment to spotlight timely topics and elevate voices from across our profession. Before we get started, just a note that the closed captioning for this session has been enabled and can be displayed by clicking the closed caption button at on the bottom right corner of your screen. If you don't see it, you may need to click on More, and then you can enable the captions on your own screen. We're so glad that you've chosen to spend your afternoon or your morning with us. I'm Alexis Foley, and I'm an Educational Program Coordinator with the ACUHO. And for those of you who found yourself on this webinar and you're not familiar with ACUHO, we are the Association of College and University Housing Officers International, and we are dedicated to advancing campus housing and residents' life globally. So today's session, presented by Denaja Thomas, our Director of the Placement Exchange, will guide professionals, you all, through reflection, planning, and action steps to proactively shape your career paths. It will cover strategies for taking ownership of career development, understanding the concept of professional agency, and positioning yourself as the primary advocate for your growth opportunities. We do want this to be an interactive session, so we encourage you to participate. If you'd like to unmute, just raise your hand using the raise hand function. And you can also use the reactions and the chat to engage. All right, and if you have questions for Denaja, you can use the chat, and we also have the Q&A function if you'd like to use that. So with all of that being said, I am going to pass it over to Denaja to get us started.
Awesome. Thank you, Alexis, and good morning, good afternoon to everyone. It is a pleasure to be with you all. I just joked with Alexis, saying that if 12 people want to hang out with me on a Friday, I consider myself pretty fortunate. So say thank you for saying yes to this time together. I think it will be worthwhile, and I hope you will leave with some strategies and some tools to help you as you think about your career development. That being said, I have sent a PDF of the presentation to Alexis, so you should be able to get a copy of that post-session so that you can go back and look at some of the questions and activities we'll do and think about how you can apply that to the work for your own career development. A little bit about me. I am the director of the Placement Exchange. For those who may not know, TPE is co-managed by ACUHO and NASPA, and so that means that I have two bosses. I work for the CEO of ACUHO and I work for the president of NASPA, and I enjoy serving both associations. Housing is my home. I was on campus for 12 years in housing and residence life before I came to the role in TPE. A little bit about what I do in this role. I'm responsible for curating spaces and opportunities for professionals just like you to have access to skills and resources pertaining to career development. In the same way, I sit in meetings and spaces to talk about how we can be forward thinking and innovative and competitive as a field overall with recruiting and hiring professionals. And then lastly, I have the privilege thinking about long term, right? What works now and in the future for how we cultivate and sustain a workforce for student affairs that is diverse, robust, and thriving. So those are some pretty lofty goals, but they're ones that I enjoy working towards on a daily basis. Again, as I said, 12 years in housing and residence life. I did 8 years in marketing and communications and 2 years in nonprofit management. In terms of my academic background, I've got an undergraduate in communication and marketing, a sport management master's, and a master's of divinity. So a wide range of experience, which you'll see how that folds out into our presentation, but just wanted to make sure you know a little bit about me. And so at TPE, again, the goal is to bring together a thriving and diverse workforce, and we do that by listening carefully. So sessions like this come from conversations that Alexis and others have had with you all, and then we curate those experiences, working on practical guidance and relevant content. Where is a space where you can go and get what you need in the moment as you think about your career journey, and then delivering those high quality events and experiences like placement, which will take place in just a couple of weeks. So, very quickly in our time together today, we're going to talk a little bit about free agency. So, if you are a sports fan, this will sound familiar to you. If you're not, I'm going to make it pretty simple and plain, but you'll see why I use language of free agency in our conversation. Then we'll define career development and then dive into talking about skills, competencies, and standards. And then after that, we're going to do a little bit of practice. So, as Alexis mentioned, the ability to hand raise and use the chat or also use the Q&A to ask questions, please do that. I'm going to give you some prompts to reflect, and then I'll ask people if they would like to share. And this session will be more engaging if you choose to share as you feel comfortable. So let's talk about free agency. Free agency is what the sports industry uses to talk about how athletes engage with going to a new team. Once a contract is done, an athlete is on the market and they have the ability to, through their agent, shop for the next best team. And so that simply means, right, if we apply this to our work, as a job seeker, as a professional practitioner, you're a free agent. You've got a certain level of competence, experience, and your own value that you see in yourself, and you're looking for a match with an employer who can give you the work, the experience, the development, and the compensation that you need. In the same way, just like a league team, an employer is that entity that has the job opportunities. They've got the resources and they hopefully have the assets available to recruit and retain you as an employee. And so, in this model, I found it to be a very level setting analogy because candidates simply have what they have and are who they are. And employers simply have what they have and can offer what they offer. And so every time you go through the job search and interview process, it's simply an opportunity to sit down at the table and find congruence and find alignment. Not that the job search or growth process doesn't feel personal, but this is a way to consider it in a way that may not cut as deep should you get feedback that doesn't suit your need, that you don't get the position you were seeking for. It's why I can tell candidates you only need one. You just need one job. And so I can interview with UMass Amherst, have a wonderful conversation. They may not have the salary that I'm looking for, and I can find a way to say, thank you for this wonderful experience. I appreciate it. And at this point in my career, this is the level of compensation that I'm looking for, and I may have to hold out for something different. In the same way, an employer could say, hey, Denaja, it was a wonderful conversation. We really enjoy meeting with you. But for this position, we're looking for a candidate that has a little more experience in this area, a little more competency and this skill set. And so while we enjoyed meeting with you, we're going to go in a different direction, right? Nothing wrong with who I am and what I have to offer. It just didn't match with what employers are looking for. And so, along that line, when we get into talking about professional development or career development, it's why having strong confidence, why autonomy and agency is really important because you become the driver of your career journey. This slide is a new slide that I've introduced to my content because higher education can be a very altruistic field. A lot of people come into doing this work because we love students. We have been touched or impacted by a mentor when we were on campus, and we really want to pay it forward. And so, the one thing that many practitioners are clear about is that they want to help students. Where they are less clear about is how things actually work on campus once you make that shift from being a student to being a professional and an agent of the institution. And so I like to talk about the business of higher education. So while students are getting a degree and we are serving our students, it is a business. And so when we think about it that way, particularly in a country where capitalism is very strong, we have to remember that our institutions are places that have to think about their financial sustainability. They have to competitively position themselves in the market. I'm in North Carolina, a state that has 16 state institutions. We're also one of the states, I think, that may have the largest number of HBCUs in any state. And so when we think about recruitment and admissions, we've got 16 state schools that are all competing with one another for the top candidates in North Carolina and then balancing that with out-of-state students that they bring in. And so in their program or degree offerings, the services that happen on the student affairs side of the house, there's the pressure and the need to be competitive with how they are positioned in the market to recruit and retain students. In the same way, our campuses are tasked with strategic planning. Housing and residence life is very pivotal to that strategic planning. Most of your offices are revenue generating auxiliaries. So people have a lot invested in how well housing and residence life does on campus. And so, as such, as a professional in this field, as much as you love students and that should remain top in your why, you also have to treat this as an intentional career choice. And so you really have to think about the rigor and the professionalism involved to progress and advance. And so the more you can recognize that there is a business side of higher education, I believe the more intentional we can be as practitioners in thinking about how we navigate this with an intentional career plan. And one of the best ways to start to do that, the data says, is to focus on skill acquisition. Skill acquisition does three things. It really helps individuals be able to adapt to a never changing market. It gives you a framework to think about where you need to enhance to market your employability and stay competitive. And so when you have a heightened awareness of the technical skills for a role, the long range skills to be a professional, and then the skills that are necessary that are specific to student development and the work that we do, you increase your likelihood of being able to adapt and pivot to have a long career in this field, to increase your likelihood of employability, and most of all, to be able to show employers that you are sharp and able to stand apart in the market. And so, again, I like to tell people there's some bullet points, there's some clear benefits to thinking about your career development and wrapping it around skill set or skill acquisition. So, as I said, that flexibility, that competitive advantage, that higher earning potential. I like number four, confidence and self efficacy. We feel good when we know what we know. And so looking at skill sets is the best way to identify what are the bucket or the groups of things that I should know and to say, I'm good at these or knowledgeable or experienced here. I could grow here. I am not experienced here. And how do you start to create a plan that helps you address where you're good to continue to nurture it, where you could be better to pour into that, and where you lack so that you can become attentive to it as you think about your long-term professional trajectory. Again, alignment with market needs. When you sit down to go into your next position or to talk with your supervisor about professional development funds, and they want to know if you've been intentional, what does it mean to say, I've assessed the needs of our students, right? Which we mean are market needs, and to say, I'm interested in improving my competency or my skill set in this area to better serve our students and to better line me up for moving up in terms of supervision or responsibility or advancing my impact on campus. So, what are these skills? There's a lot of them. We have honed in on some ones that are recommended by NACE, which is the Association for Campuses and Employers. They are responsible for most of the career centers that are on our campuses. We have found that looking at that model to serve undergraduate students and mapping it over to how to serve professionals has given us a lot of cohesion. And so some of the skills that fall under career readiness and advancement per NACE include the ability to self-assess and think intentionally about your development, which you're doing today by joining me, communication, critical thinking, equity and inclusion, leadership, supervision and management, teamwork, technology, and then your particular functional area competencies and skills, and then developing that skill to chart pathways and engage in networking. In the same way, there's a set of skills that are important for the job search process. That includes your ability to tell your story and to share your personal brand, your ability to show up clear, concise, and compelling in the interview space, and then your ability to engage in negotiation in the process of offer acceptance. My TPE add-ons, which I'm a fan of, include emotional intelligence, political acumen, and conflict management. And that is just from observation of how heavily focused on customer service. The work has become the need to help students mitigate conflict means that we too have to know how to manage and mitigate conflict. And then that political acumen, when you join a campus to know who makes decisions where, who has buy-in, who sits at the table, what does representation for my need and my concerns look like? Where do I have influence? Where do I have direct control? Where do I need to lobby to ensure that my needs or my unit or team needs are taken care of? And so that's a lot of skills on a slide, but they are very important skills to think about And if you were to reflect on an interview that you've had, you've probably heard star interview questions to address this. Tell me about a time that you had to have a difficult conversation. Tell me about a time that you got feedback. How did you receive it? How did you manage it? How did you adjust? Tell us about a time that you created an event or project. What were the outcomes? How did you assess it? And re-offer that program or that experience. And so while they are situational questions, they are really intended to see where you are in terms of your proficiency or competence in these critical skill areas. Now, when we talk about technical skills, there are the ACUHO standards and the CAS standards. I love ACUHO for their intention on standards. Not many other associations have taken the time to identify the skill sets or the standards that are necessary to be successful in this work and invest in creating pathways or guidance for how professionals can cultivate and build these skills at various levels in your career. So if you were to go and look up the ACUHO standards, which I encourage you to do, you can look at what it means to address these areas as a new and emerging professional, a mid manager, and a senior professional. And so then CAS also has their own set of standards that are worth considering. They're helpful if you decide you're in housing and you want to make a pivot to academic advising or to case management or to another functional area in higher ed. CAS can pull some general standards from those areas so that you can start to think about how your transferable skills speak to those standards when you get ready to go through the interview process or as you map your career development plan for thinking about future goals. As if two slides of skills is not enough, as one moves up into managerial roles or leadership roles, you add a new set of skills that you need to be competent in. KUHOI standards have human resources as a bullet point for skill set. And so within that, TPE has taken the leisure of introducing some bullet points to think about under that area. So how are you staying aware of hiring trends and best practices? What are your awareness of job seeker attitudes, that branding and marketing, recruiting, your committee management and composition, your interviewing and candidate assessment? Those are all skills that have to be nurtured and developed as one who is responsible for the hiring or as a hiring manager who trusts the committee to take care of that. And then that retention piece. Once you bring on team members, what skills do you need to be attentive to retain that talent? Not just to your office, but we want to keep folk in the field. And so whether you leave me and go to another campus, have I supervised or managed you in a way and created an environment that supports you in a way such that you still want to stay either in housing or residence life or at least in student affairs and higher education. So that's my spiel on free agency and why skill acquisition or skill development is so important before we jump into the majority of our time, which is going to be around that intentional career development piece. Before I do that, I will pause. I've said like 9 slides worth of information. Any questions, any initial thoughts, any aha moments about the information that I've shared with us thus far?
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Yo, thank you very much for your session. But I just want to ask in the Aqua set of skills that you listed, I just want to ask that do you think it's necessary to add that we need to have a knowledge of certain use of particular software? Like I know that many schools use Massent. Do you think that should be in the set of skills that may be required for particularly people looking at working in housing?
Yes. So it typically falls under the category what they would say are technical skills. And so on the residence life side, it may be around curriculum for programming for students in the hall. If you're on the housing and operations side, it may be software like StarVest that helps you with your bed management or your facilities processes. If you are in the conduct or dean of students role, it could be Maxient. Um, the other softwares are forgetting are leaving my brain, but yes, part of that skill building and competency is being able to be proficient, knowledgeable, or have mastery, right? Those are kind of the words that we may use with that type of technology, particularly as you move up. So what does it mean to be a coordinator? and to get used to using StarRez for low-level things, but begin to work closely with your operations or occupancy management side of the house if you know you may want to pivot in that direction to build experience to become a more experienced user with actually assigning rooms or pulling reports and helping with that forecasting of occupancy management. So you can have an introductory or level one usury ability. You can also then kind of move up and improve your ability to master and use a system. I think of colleagues who have moved to the senior housing officer role. If you're coming from that res life, res ed side of the house to work closely with the housing and facilities folk, right, on building renovations, new projects, so that you also start to learn the brick and mortar aspects of the role, so that as you move up, you can talk about being a candidate who fully understands the student experience and that curriculum design piece, that community building piece, but you also understand the operational piece, how you set your price for your beddings and run occupancy management. And then you also understand how you set your financial plans for your building renovations, your long-term management of your properties and facilities. So yes, it's a wonderful question around technical use, but want to give you an example of how you can kind of use that to pivot as you move up in housing and residence life. Wonderful question. Thank you. And Nathan, thank you for sharing your feedback about the free agency piece. My colleague Spencer and I began to talk about it, particularly coming out of the pandemic into endemic. It was a very polarizing time, right? Everyone was feeling the pinch. Employers were not shy on saying all of the concerns and gaps in applicants and what they needed and weren't getting. And at that time, job seekers were not shy around saying all of the things that employers needed to improve and address. And so it was kind of, we don't have what we need because you all are doing this, and we don't have what we need because you all are doing this. And free agency really seemed to tone it down a little bit, and kind of level set and say, hey, in a capitalistic system, people are free agents. They have what they have, you have what you have, and you're just trying to find that congruence and that agreement. So it's not perfect, but it has helped us really level set that conversation. So let's dive into career development. Semantics really matters to me. And so I loved that Alexis said this was about career development and helping people think about how to jumpstart their strategy and their plan. And so I want to offer to you the definition of career development that our friends at NACE operates under. And I've highlighted some key words. Career development is a continuous process of managing a couple of things, your life, your learning, and your work, with the intended outcome of moving towards a predetermined goal in a future that you've got for yourself. And so within career development, you're talking about gaining skills, knowledge, and experience to support that growth and that adaptability across changing work environments. And so this may not be what serves you only in the moment for the job that you're in and the students that you serve. This is intended to think about what is your plan and strategy to serve you now and help guide you for where you see yourself in the next 5 years, 10 years, and 15 years, with the ability to be flexible and malleable as you move forward. And so the other thing that I want to say about this is that career development is not professional development. And that's not a slight to our language around professional development plans, and that's not really getting in the weeds, or my hope is to not get in the weeds. But when we talk about professional development, we are really talking about those specific activities that you do that enhance your skills and your abilities. And so professional development is the workshops that you go to, the certifications and the training sessions like this that you attend. These are professional development opportunities, but the goal is for them to come together to support your overall career development plan. And so I'm going to talk to you today about 3 theories. I'm a theoretical person. I'm not going to bore you with them, but I think you'll see where the link fits. And the first is, all right, get something out of the way, is the career construction theory. With this theory, the main premise that I want you to take away from this is your pathways are shaped by how you make sense of your personal story. Your personal story, your life experiences, and the world that you experience around you. And so the importance of this is it helps you really think through what is your vocational identity. Who are you as a practitioner or a professional who is doing the work of housing and residence life? And then what do you have in place to think about how to be adaptable with your career? And what are some of the themes that you have seen across your career? In the same way, um, It matters because when I talk to candidates about storytelling, it has created the most freeing way for them to think about how they show up in the job market and the interview space. I tell people, as opposed to memorizing perfect responses, get really comfortable knowing your story because your story is your power. The next one that I want to introduce to you is the boundaryless career theory. And I like this one from Author and Rousseau because it says that some workforces, but particularly our current contemporary workforce, is absolutely characterized by boundaryless career patterns. Student Affairs does that. Within our field, there's like 60 something functional areas that one could be a part of and still say that you're a student affairs practitioner. You all are housing and residence life professionals, but you share campus with folk who are in counseling, who are in case management, who are in other functional areas, but all fall under that umbrella. And as such, it's important that you think about the importance of building a network, skill adaptability, and that it means you have to own your career path. This is not a field where you leave and they go, in 3 years, you'll be here, in 5 years, you'll be here, in 6 years, you'll be here. You really have to think about where you want to go and take that ownership and responsibility for how you are going to get yourself there. And so it was actually designed or developed in the 1990s when we had a very serious round of company downsizing and restructuring. And so that typical notion of job security, right, 30 years at a job, really was no longer the case. And so it introduced this notion of I need to be mobile or flexible if I'm going to have career progression, excuse me. Um, what I love about it is it really does talk about how you can leverage those professional relationships and ground them in some mentorship and networking. The next theory is social cognitive theory. And this says that we learn from others and we imitate their behaviors. And when it comes to career choices, that is what gives us confidence. And so, right, this notion of self efficacy, the belief in your abilities. Our field is one that does a lot of shoulder tapping. A lot of people come into this work because they were RAs or student leaders in some way, and someone said, "Hey, I believe in your abilities. You could really do this." And when you may have not seen it, they were able to kind of name some skills and some qualities and attributes that they saw about you and talk about how you could see that in a fulfilling career. The challenge is, once you started this work, very seldom does someone come right back in and continue to affirm and lift that up for you. This theory is one that helps you think through how you do that for yourself. And so, the last thing I want to say to tie these three together before we actually get into some activity, and I'm excited, we've got a good bit of time for the activity, is for you to think about at the end of the day, what are the career goals that you intend to accomplish? Right? I can offer you theories, I can tell you how to create or start to think about your career development plan, but ultimately that rests on what is it you intend to accomplish? Where do you see yourself? What do you see yourself doing? Because once you can do that, then you can start to think through your plan of action to move forward. And so we're going to talk about that plan of action. But as we do that, I would love for you, if it's on your phone, you can type it in. But if you've got a piece of paper to jot in, what's your long-term career goal? And if you feel comfortable, you can put that in the chat. I would love to see that. So, our first activity is going to be rooted around the career construction theory. So, just as a reminder, this is the one that says we build our pathways by making sense of our personal stories, right? That vocational personality. I always tell people think experiential learning, right? Experiential learning says, how do I do something, make meaning of it, and then adapt it to my changing environment to continue to grow and stretch? The outcome of this is really heightened self awareness and it's really strong storytelling and it really helps you create a compelling narrative that aligns with your professional goals. And the first way to do this is to answer a very simple question. Who are you? If someone were to ask you, "Hi, Bill, who are you?" What would you say back to them? In this setting, you would probably offer your role and your title on your campus. But in any space, who we are is made up of a couple of different things. And for me, in the professional space, I help people think about your personal reflection, right? The identities that you hold, the values that you hold, and any of your qualities or attributes that you know how to talk about. So that could come from Strength Finder, MBTI, True Colors, Enneagram. With those, they are just language to talk about who you already are. So, yes, we can bullet point our strengths or our Enneagram, but I really push folk to be able to talk about what that means for you. Tell me your result in your own words. And then I say, how have you seen this show up in your work to make this true or not, right? Because I could be an Enneagram 1, Carly could be an Enneagram 1, and we're still not going to be the same person. So, what does it mean for you to say, I'm an Enneagram 1? How does that show up in the way that you engage in your work, the career choices that you've made, your role on a team, all of those sorts of things? So, name them, but then be willing to go one step further to pull it together. In the same way, some reflection on your role as a team member. People love asking the question, like, what part or what role do you play on a team? Be ready to answer that. After you've had a team meeting or been with some folk for a while, ask someone out to coffee and say, hey, what do you think of me as a team member? How do you see me showing up? Lean into that ability to be curious, to learn how others see you so that you have an accurate self awareness of your role on a team and not just an assumption or a guess or the perception of how you see yourself. You can say, well, I see myself as a quiet content giver. But I learned that my teammates see me as someone who is lighthearted and is very able to diffuse stress or tense moments, right? That shows that balance. So I absolutely love a way of thinking about that. And then leadership identity reflection. LID is a wonderful model to do this. Most people, the higher up you go, people ask you about your leadership philosophy. What kind of leader are you? Being able to do some reflection around how you see yourself as a leader, how that has shown up, and how others have responded to that is a wonderful way to strengthen your ability to tell your story. Now, you all, the first group that I'm going to be vulnerable and do this with, because I feel like when you invite people to do a practice, you should be able to test it and make sure it works. So, with this kind of who you are question, I created a slide of what I call my stats, which is the easiest part for people to do, right? We give each other the categories, right? My name is Swahili, so it happens to mean successful and deliver for people. The identities that are really salient to me are that I'm a Black woman. I live in Southern North Carolina. I'm cis hetero. I'm an elder millennial. I will not say geriatric. I am upper middle class. I'm married. I have a learning disability, but I'm also advanced degreed. I am a parent. I'm also an ordained minister. And so you see some of those qualities and attributes that are also there. What I wanted to show is when we talk about compelling story, it is to take all of the things that are here on this bullet list, but to start to look for and weave together themes that show congruence about how all these show up in who you are and what you do. So you see my bullet points. What I give you now is my story. I hold two bios, right? Because I function in a space in ordination as a reverend, but I also serve as the director of the placement exchange. So Alexis, now you see why I didn't have you have you read my bio. So you all saw my stats. What that translates into is me being able to say, Denaja Pendergrass Thomas is a practitioner whose work is centered around organizational behavior with a focus on recruitment, professional development, and career advancement. That is what I do. Committed to helping organizations and communities bring out transformational change in these areas, she currently serves as the director of the Placement Exchange and works closely to drive equitable and inclusive communities, knowledge resources, job search, and recruiting experiences that cultivate and sustain a diverse and robust workforce. So there's my short bio. But if we go back, authenticity is a value. Integrity is a value. Meaning, purpose, growth, and clarity are values for me. My leadership identity is one of transformational leadership, meaning my staff, when I was on campus, could tell you I ask questions all the time. I want to know how this work is shaping you. Who are you becoming as a result of doing this work on this campus with this team with me as a supervisor because it's not just about getting it done. Hopefully, it's about becoming a little better while you do it. In the same way, right? I've been in nonprofits, I've been in athletics, and I've been in this field. That shapes my approach to how I manage and lead TPE. So, the goal with this theory is for you to be able to say, here are my stats. Here's how I begin to weave it together to tell my story. And that matters because your story is your power, friends. There is literally only one you. And so a lot of people go into the interview space or go into the recruiting space and try to memorize perfect answers, right? And so if something doesn't go well, they're like, man, I should have said this, I should have said that, I forgot to share this, or whatever the next thing is. I tell people, I just want you to get really, really familiar with your story. Because whatever the question is, if you know your story, you can answer the question because it's just knowing who you are and what you've done and being able to tell that in a way that distinguishes you from other folk and other candidates in the process. So, here's the first activity. I want you to just take a moment to think about the experiences that have shaped your identity and have created turning points for you so far. If you're a new and emerging professional, you can think about what has happened in your graduate education or undergraduate education. If you are a more advancing professional, you can fold in some experiences from your career. But then I want you to think about the challenges and successes that you have experienced and what you learned from them. That's the big piece. Not just what you experienced, but what did you learn? What was your takeaway that really had a lasting impact on you? And then that third piece is what are the skills and values and interests that have influenced your path thus far? We all have a laundry list of things that we say are values, but what are the ones that have deeply impacted your path thus far? What are the skills that have really influenced your path thus far? And what are those interests? For me, in making the leap from being on campus to TPE, it is the investment in professional development. My last supervisory role was fully supervision. So all I did was take care of how we recruited and how we retained. So I did professional development, one-on-one feedback loops, anything and everything that would help make our team strong professionals. So when the opportunity came to shift from only thinking about that for my campus to thinking about that for the full profession, it became a natural fit. So as you think about these prompts, really think about the threads that you see and the experiences and skills and interests that you have. And then step two, start to design your future. When you look at that, what are some of the things that you want in a future role or in a full career that aligns with that? I love marketing and PR, but I don't want to do it full time. It can be a function of what I do, but I don't want to be a full-time marketer. I love doing ed content and sessions like this, but I don't want to be a professional trainer and developer. There are other aspects of this role that make it appealing and help bring fulfillment to me as a professional. So if you know that you want to stay student facing, a VPSA role may not be it, or a VPSA role at a small campus that allows you to see students on a regular basis might be where you can hit the goal of being a VPSA and not lose the fact that having direct contact or interfacing with students on a regular basis is a priority and a value to you. And then once you set those goals, that's where you will start to create strategies to leverage those strengths and learning experiences to move up and then think about how you make meaningful future career steps that reaffirm this career identity that you have and help reinforce that as you move up in the field. So that's the first practice that I want you to be able to take with you as you think about creating this career development plan. I will not put anyone on the spot, but if there is someone who would like to try to give us a 60-second introduction of who you are, I would love to hear a snippet of your story. Also, hi Heather, we're glad you made it in. All right, well, no pressure. We'll keep moving. The next theory that I'm going to give you the practice or the activity for is the social cognitive career theory. So, as a reminder, this is the one that helps us think about cultivating strong self efficacy and reinforce that realistic goal setting. The reflection questions that I want you to take away with this one is to really do that skills assessment or that skills inventory. And so, from those lists that I gave you, what are the career skills that you feel very confident in using? I didn't put it here, but you could also say, what are the skills that you do not feel confident in using? And then, right, the next piece around that is what barriers do you anticipate facing as you advance? And then how might you overcome them? What's your strategy for overcoming them? I read a lot in the social media space. I do not comment, but I do read. And oftentimes, the barriers that people face can feel very overwhelming, and people feel like they have no agency or no power in how to navigate or overcome them. One thing I say to people is if you spend time thinking about how you can anticipate them, it can help you feel a little less thrown off when you experience them. So, for example, I'm working with two job seekers right now who know they have contract positions that will end in July. We started meeting in October because we know that the market is very difficult. We also know that if one wants to pivot, you might want to add some extra time for the need to network, to do some informational interviews, and make some extra headway as you think about making a transition. So, knowing what the market is, they did not wait until June, right, to think about needing a position in July. We are slowly working towards putting all of these things in place. And really, we started applying for positions when we came back from winter break. And so that also means giving themselves 6 to 8 months to apply for positions, knowing that the process can take a while in our field for various reasons. And so to mitigate that, that means giving yourself a longer runway for the application and interview process if you know you've got a firm deadline for when you need a position. So again, it's not perfect. I can't guarantee that they're going to have a position when their contract's in, but I'm very hopeful that they will. And they feel very confident in the timeline around thinking about where their challenges are and at least having a strategy and a plan for how to anticipate them and address them as they work on their next opportunity. Similarly, what outcomes do you realistically expect and why? I'll stay with this example. They know that this isn't a perfect strategy, but they expect that it will help them kind of build those muscles, open their network, increase their likelihood for opportunities, and if nothing else, build more relationships that can help them as they stretch out the lifeline of their career. That last reflection question to think about external factors that influence your expectations on your career outcomes is really important. And so, is it a mentor? Is it a coach? Is it a supervisor who is willing to leverage their influence and capacity to help you? Is it coming to TPE to get free coaching and guidance because you may not have it on your campus? Is it being a part of one of the affinity networks that ACUHO offers? Is it registering for Leadership Academy to be in a place to get that long-term mentorship or support? Think about those factors that can influence the expectations that you have about your income outcome, and how you can leverage or improve those factors. So it's okay if you say today, then I haven't thought about any of those external factors. Then step one might be to just identify them. And then once you identify them, if it's a person, reach out to that person and find out their capacity, their willingness, or their interest to support your career outcomes. If it is applying for an institute, think about your career outcome. And as you write your essay for that institute, talk about the process that, right, I'm working on a career development plan and I'm starting to identify factors that can influence my long-term outcome. I see the Mid-Manager Institute as a great opportunity to help me become stronger at supervision, strategic planning, and whatever else you see for yourself in the next 3 to 5 years. If you don't get it this year, you may be early enough in thinking about it that you reapply next year and you increase your likelihood for getting accepted. So the big key on this fourth one is to just get into the process of naming those factors and continuing to think about how you engage with them. Again, to give you a bit of a longer runway to leverage them to improve the likelihood of reaching your career outcomes. The last one again is that boundaryless career theory, and the outcome of it is to really have ownership. So I've given you some reflection questions, given you some tips and some strategies. With this one, in terms of owning your career path, it's all about agility and transitions. You do. You want to create that map. You want to see where your past roles have been, paint that visual picture for yourself. And then you want to do what I call making your laundry list. Most people who are in highly vocational work, meaning deep, meaningful work, have a high level of humility, which is okay, but also feel deeply uncomfortable with bragging on themselves. This is a good way to think about how to brag on yourself and it be rooted in concrete things so that you can say, I'm not being braggadocious. I am just stating facts. When you look at your past roles and experiences, start to make a list of all the skills and all the knowledge and all the networks that you've gained from each role. Map it out until you get yourself a really nice web, and then start to think about if I wanted to pivot to the housing ops side, it looks like this. If I want to stay where I am but move up to mid-level, these are the things that will help me do that. These are the people that can support that. These are the resources that can help me go there. Being able to visually see it is really helpful. So yes, I am that kindergarten teacher. I invite you to go get you some chart paper and some markers. Whether you do it at home or in your office, put that up on the wall and make that visual map so that you can start to see how things map and come together. As you do that, the reflection questions I would like you to think about are what types of boundaries have you crossed, right? Whether it's organizational, professional, or geographic. I have navigated private institutions, small campuses. I can talk with intentionality about why. And with that, I cross boundaries in moving up from early career or new and emerging professional to mid manager. But then also, right, I reorged the whole unit. And so, what does that mean to see my position in relationship to the reorg of a full unit? What boundaries did I have to cross to do that? What roles or skills did I have to give up or pivot or reassign to do that? Who did I have to collaborate with on campus to do that? Those geographic boundaries, many of us by the time we're mid managers will have been on at least 3 campuses. And so, how can you talk about geographic, moving states, or campus demographic? I've gone from a small private to a flagship state institution. I've been in an R1, I've been in a liberal arts university, I've been on a campus that had a 3 year living requirement, I've been on a campus that only requires 1 year. Think about all those nuancing factors that you have crossed in terms of boundaries and how these types of transitions and growth opportunities contributed to you building and cultivating and expanding your skills. In the same way, be able to identify the networks in the relationship that help you navigate those changes. Was it a strong supervisor? Was it a coach? Was it a peer who was just like, you're new to this, follow me, I won't lead you astray? And then what patterns do you notice about how you manage your career mobility? What has driven your decisions about moving from one opportunity to the next? If you've made a couple of career moves, go back and reflect and look at the threads and the themes that drove you in that direction, and why they matter. And then this is the first one that starts to tie it to, right, some homework for you to do. Think about some goals that will encourage you to stretch your mobility and learning across boundaries. If you're going to make an industry switch, do those informational interviews and get to know people. Make that a goal. If it's project based and you know your next opportunity needs to have assessment, work with a campus partner who does that. If you know you want to collaborate with dean of students, or case management or care of those offices, think about some goals that you can create to encourage that mobility and learning across professional boundaries for yourself. And then think about 1 to 2 intentional network building strategies. This field necessitates that you cultivate networking as a skill. You just have to. And coming from someone whose annual conference was the American Academy of Religion, it was like night and day. And so I have no problem saying networking had to be a very learned and cultivated skill for me because it was not necessary in the work that I used to do. And so knowing that, right, if you're going to go to a conference or participate in an institute, add networking as one of your goals and outcomes as an attendee, not just session attendance, but say, I'm going to meet 1 to 2 people at this event or at this conference. introduce myself, and see if I can create a future connection with a colleague. And then the last piece, right? We come back to that big list of skills, right? Skill acquisition makes you stand out, makes you competitive. What are transferable skills that support boundary crossing? So there are the ones that are specific to housing and residence life, but then there are the evergreen or long range skills. Communication is one of them, leadership is one of them, strategy and planning is another. Find 3 to 5 of those skills that support boundary crossings. I can't find my words today. And think about how you're going to continue to strengthen and cultivate and develop those skills. So, in terms of making your plan, I just want to reiterate the 3 foci, right? You want career goals that are aligned with your personal narrative and your values. And then you want those strategies for how you're going to strengthen your self efficacy and your ability to overcome obstacles. And then you're going to want to create that plan for how you're going to do boundary crossing, how you're going to do skill development, and how you're going to network. Within these 3 foci, then you can look at your annual professional development plan and choose things that will help you address those 3 areas. The outcome is that you get a career development plan that is a long range strategy that is always helping you improve your self awareness, your practical skill building, your adaptability, and your goal setting so that you can manage how you progress in this field. So, right, career development is continuous. It is continuous. I love NACE's definition. It is a continuous process of managing life, learning, and work, but it's towards that predetermined goal and outcome that you have for yourself. And we hope that these focal areas will help you bring all of that together and give you some tangible ways to do that. And so, of course, TPE can help you. Everything we do for ACUHO members and NASPA members is free of charge. So if you're at a place and you're like, Denaja, I want to do this clear, concise, compelling storytelling in my materials. I need someone to look at my resume and my cover letter. We can do materials review for you. If you would like or need to have a coaching conversation to really get into the weeds with some of the strategy for building your community, your career development plan, we can support you with that. And if you find yourself in the interview process and you're like, how do I bring all this together to tell my story, to leverage my network, to have a strategic job search process, that mock interview space is a space where we can support you with that. And so, of course, our contact information is here. Again, I believe Alexis has a way to send these things out to you as attendees to the session, but we are at 12:53. Maybe if we have 5 or 6 minutes, I'm happy to answer any questions that anyone might have.
Okay, quick question since I can unmute myself.
Mhm.
Uh, do we have to pay for mock interview session with TPA?
No, everything that we offer is of no charge.
Last question.
Mhm.
How was your experience working in housing for 12 years?
I absolutely loved it. You all will find I'm a very transparent person. I made a career pivot because of life decisions. I had a little preemie baby in the middle of the pandemic, and so staying on campus was not a viable career choice for my family at the time. So I had to look for another opportunity that still supported the passions and the interests that I have. Otherwise, I would probably still be on a campus working in housing and residence life. Nathan, I see you. I try to make things concise because my ADD I can run away with things. So I'm glad you enjoy the information. Awesome. Well, Alexis has my contact information. You all, please don't hesitate to reach out to me. Reach out to TPE if we can be a support and resource for you.
Wonderful. Thank you, Denaja. This was a fantastic presentation, very thoughtful and action oriented. You've given our audience a great set of tools that they can use to map out their professional roadmap with intention and purpose. So, as a reminder to everyone, as Denaja mentioned, the presentation slides will be sent out. We will also be adding this recording to our Cool Eye webinar playlist on YouTube. But thank you again, Denaja, and thank you all for joining us today. We look forward to seeing you at future webinars.